Hello, and welcome to my Nioh 2 Ultimate Damage Guide. In the last video, I showed you how to maximize your damage theoretically. However, upon a few fights, I found some of it a little problematic. The biggest issue I had was underestimating small damage like fire left on the ground from Kasha or Shibata Katsui. In this guide, we'll try to fix that and keep as much damage as possible. Now, let us start by going into our hidden Teahouse at the starting point in the mission select screen. From there, we can select Transfer to look at a few options to boost our damage. First up, we have the Oda clan, which give us some decent Guardian Spirit skill damage as well as extended confusion time. This is actually a decent clan if you are a pro at confusion cycling. However, I find it too hard for the average player. Next up, we have the Maeda clan. This gives you a decent damage boost to thrust attacks, which just so happen to be the most used spear attacks as well as its heavy hitters. Additionally, upon a grapple or a sneak attack, you will reduce your foe's defense to 0. Depending on the enemy, sometimes this effect will persist a second or two after the grapple, allowing you to get some heavy damage during the enemy's recovering animation. Finally, we have the Shimoza clan. This clan boasts a decent melee damage boost in the critical state as well as quickens your ki recovery. It's a decent option, but as for the guide, we're gonna go with the Maeda clan. Now, let's leave the Teahouse and go into the dojo and get some numbers. Here are my stats I have for the build, which primarily is for the spear and sword, but in this case, dual swords as well. This allows us to have ultimate magic, skill, strength, and courage. As far as scrolls, you want to try and get a high sentience charge as well as your ultimate stats. Path of the Ruthless will increase our damage by 20%, but make us take 30% more as well. This is the weapon we will be using for our tests. Notice there are no damage rolls on it. We will run Corruption because when it awakens it will give us a 30% damage increase and shoot a beam on strong attacks. Alright, let's begin. Timestamps will be in the video, but let's watch that one more time in slow motion. As you can see, the damage for each of these are very high and each skill has something rather unique to them. Twisting Spear has the highest single hit damage. High Stance Strong Attack has the highest damage on command. And Triple Threat has the highest damage overall. Or, does it? When using a corrupted weapon and your weapon is in its awakened state, the last strong attack in a combo will shoot a projectile. In High Stance, this projectile does about 30%, give or take, of your strong attack damage and isn't affected by any modifiers and cannot be boosted. I have now included the numbers of 2 high stance strong attacks with awakened beams. Even at just a 20% increase, the 2 strong attacks beats out a full triple threat. Now, let us begin reviewing some graces and set bonuses that offer high damage. 7-piece Ame no Azume offers the Death Dancer, which boasts a 70% damage increase buff that can be refreshed. 7-piece Izanagi offers both the melee damage buff of 30% against purified targets as well as Cleansing Prayer, also referred to as the Trinity buff. While this is a good 60% boost, this is a problem because it is a 7-piece set, conflicting with Ame no Azume's 70% boost. And we are going to want to be using a corrupted weapon for the 30% damage boost during its awakened state, and corruption overwrites purity and purity overwrites corruption. In the end, this is a no-go as far as maximizing damage. However, versatility is a 60% boost and is offered in a 6-piece set. Let's look at the 2 graces. Benzaten's Grace offers versatility in the 6-piece slot and some ninjutsu power and can be picked up as early as Dream of the Demon. Susano offers versatility in the 6-piece slot and gives us some ki recovery and defense on a purification. Since we are doing a max damage build, we don't really need the defense, and running Ame no Azume is going to give us plenty of ki recovery as is. So let's look at some set bonuses and maybe we can find what we're looking for there. So, Warrior of the West is already out of the picture because it is a 7-piece set, and we wouldn't be able to get the Ame no Azume set, and Ame no Azume is the highest damage boost in the game. Additionally, this set gets rid of your backstab bonus, which is another big boost around 30 to 60%. Hard pass. The rightful eccentric set is amazing. This tooltip here is incorrect, as at 4 pieces, you get 6% increase to strong attack, and at 6 pieces you get another 8.7%. So pretty near 15% total on your strong attacks. Plus, versatility. We've already talked about how good strong attacks are, and so getting another 15% increase to them is greatly received, and now 2 of them hit for just under what a full triple threat does, closing that gap even further. Alright, so let's look at the gear and what it looks like. As you can see, we run 6-piece the rightful eccentric plus, and the 7-piece Ame no Azume set. This gives us a 130% boost at full stacks. They also complement each other quite nicely, as some bosses are easier to stack one buff than the other, so you pretty much always have something. There are a few things I would prioritize in this build. As far as your weapon, you really want Corruption to roll on Vermilion Spear. Starred rolls for both grapple and attack bonus on a 200 stat will complement your build, but aren't as important as you can get the regular rolls in a pinch. For your helmet, you really want Anima Charge on melee attack. Your chest and waist you want to grab Sentience Charge and some fire resistance. Your boots should be light to get extended dodge and vulnerability. As far as your accessories, this should both be Omomoris for the resistance and roll fire resistance on them. You really want starred Sentience Charge first. One of them need to have set bonus requirements -1, and then take any start attack rolls you can. For our Guardian Spirits, we're gonna take Janameko as our primary and Ho as our secondary. At 1 HP, Janameko will give us a 30% increase to our damage, and at a critical HP condition start generating our Yokai shift gauge. Ho is the only Guardian Spirit that will actively increase your damage as a secondary, albeit only 4% in high stance, and is Brute, so you can use the Brute Burst counter to count as a stack of versatility. We're going to use Aburo Girama to apply Corruption fast to start doing max ki damage to Yokai, and use Gozuki to destroy their max ki when their regular ki is depleted. Nurikabe will finish off max ki if Gozuki doesn't, while also being our easiest and most reliable way to dodge grab attacks, as most grab attacks don't actually do damage unless the grab works. We also want to try and get Sentience Charge and Nullify damage and Yokai Shift for Soul Cores on our Guardian Spirits. For our secondary spirit, you just want high elemental status procs so that you can apply confusion or exploit enemies' weaknesses, if applicable. So here's our stats again, now with our gear equipped. If done properly, you should have 60 fire resistance. This is important as having 60 resistance to fire will make you immune to all fire damage when you have the Fire Stop Talisman effect. Fire is the element most common to leave trails on the ground and can be devastating to this build. Now that we've discussed our gear, let's take a minute to look at other ways to increase our damage. In ninjutsu, you can get both Last Gambit and Power Pills. For this particular build, I find that the Last Gambit is the only buff item worth using. In Amio, however, you can get both the Carnage Talisman and the Soul Purge Talisman to increase your damage substantially. Both items have drawbacks. The Carnage will reduce your defense by about 20%, and the Soul Purge Talisman will reduce familiarity on your weapon to 0. The effect happens immediately when you die, pray at a shrine, proceed floors on the underworld, use a Soul Release Talisman, or switch weapons. However, our familiarity doesn't drop to 0 until the effect wears off, and if we finish the mission before the buff runs out, we keep our familiarity. This makes it good for final boss fights or duel missions. The Carnage buff is also relatively short, so we invest in both Courage and Magic to boost our Onmyo magic power. Final note, not only does the Power Pill and Carnage Talisman override each other, but these buffs also conflict with the Purify Yokai Realm buff. If you purify a Yokai Realm in high stance, you will get an even stronger 50% damage increase buff that will overwrite Carnage or Power Pill buffs for 10 seconds. When the Purify Realm buff wears off, you will revert back to the Carnage or Power Pill buff. And, lastly, Berserk is great before a grapple for big damage. Now, back to melee attacks. With Ame no Azume, you want to be evasive. Low stance offers less ki consumption, quicker attacks in general, and a free dodge basically anytime you dodge to ki pulse with ultimate skill. Some attacks benefit from the extra iframes from high stance, and you can get even more iframes by feral burst countering after a dodge. But in general, low stance is where we rack up stacks of both versatility and Death Dancer. However, did you know that your dodge attacks benefit from strong attacks? We can test this by taking off our eccentric set as well as Death Dancer, and trying both a quick attack after a dodge and a strong attack after a dodge. Without the eccentric set, they do the same damage. However, with the eccentric set, your strong attacks do more damage. Your strong attacks will also do more elemental damage if you use an elemental talisman or an Oni B elemental buff. Earlier in the video, I had mentioned that some bosses are harder to apply one buff than another. This is due to a variation of factors, but in general it comes down to how fast they attack, their poise, and some humans stunting your mid and low stance attacks. Active skills cannot be stunted or parried. However, both quick and strong attacks in mid and low stance can be. Honda is a good example of a human stunting your attacks and one of my favorite enemies in the game. I'll start by showing you a quick demonstration of this set in action. But first, a blooper. I killed him twice this way, thinking I must have stepped in the lightning and lost my Death Dancer buff. Oof. Alright, now pay attention to how easily you can get stacks at the start of the fight. Final Blow, Twisting Spear, Brute Burst Counter is a great start to versatility. Unfortunately, Death Dancer has a 2 to 3 second time frame to gain another stack. Also pay special attention to my low stance quicks and strongs getting deflected. This is where player experience and spacing comes in clutch if you want to get skills like Pole Kick or Spear Bash off. He even deflects my dodge attacks technically, but the damage goes through. Another trick is to hold block while dodging left or right in low stance. This is actually a technique I picked up from another game. However, it finds great use here as well. Don't worry if you block and lose a stack of Death Dancer. Staying alive is more important, and you can technically Spear Flourish or Rainbow Ruse to gain it back with ultimate strength. I didn't think Fatal Thrust would actually kill him here because Fatal Thrust grapple damage is significantly less than a regular grapple. But, hey, it's flashy. Now I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about my Jutsu. The hidden skills Exorcist Blade and Umbral Bullet can be used to perform a double grapple. Basically against certain yokai enemies like Yatsu no Kami and Itsamade. When you grapple them, if you perform a yokai shift or use either of these two ninjutsu, they will re-enter the grapple state. Exorcist Blade is also good for dealing with clones from Gozuki and Kashin Koji. Medusa Powder is great at dealing with humans as stunning them will put them in a grapple state or for yokai that have long Dark Realm transitions, since, if you can stun them before they finish you can re-grapple them. Cutting Blast is a very important jutsu to this build since it can allow your yokai shift form to shoot your weapon's awakened beams with the yokai shift strong attacks and charged strong attacks. The only prerequisite for this is that your weapon is awakened when you go into yokai shift. You can also shoot beams with familiar talismans, but only 4. The Spirit Surge talismans are decent additions to our arsenal as the spear lacks a lot of key damage. Being able to burst counter and yokai shift for more key damage is a pretty big deal. However, if you use another weapon that has a lot of key damage, you can use something else. Familiar talismans are great for the spear in particular as spear is not only lacking in the key damage department, but the status application rate as well. I use water in the build, because a saturated-based confusion will net us 20% more damage on top of confusion's 50%. Here is a demonstration of the Fire Stop talisman. Without it, We can catch fire and die due to the initial fire damage, or become burned and our yokai shift will drain due to both the initial damage and burn effect. For this reason, we also run a resistance talisman so that we cannot become poisoned or paralyzed and we take no poison damage. While I didn't have a fire stop talisman on running through the fire, I had level sync on, so it actually reduced my resistance to fire by a few points, and so I didn't have my complete 100% immunity to fire anyway. But that's still okay because this is actually a boss with a lot of openings where you can sneak your skills in and greed some high stand strong attacks, reaping that big boost from Death Dancer and Eccentric set. Look at this guy, about to take some heavy damage. Watch the Maeda clan grapple defensive shred. My first strong attack after the grapple is significantly stronger than my second. This run could have been better. Technically, I didn't get full stacks of Death Dancer until my last hit, and I forgot to Fatal Thrust with Raging Strike to reduce my HP to 1 for Janemeko's massive 30% boost. The perfect run is not in my stars. I wanted to show you what a pretty boosted grapple looked like against everyone's favorite yokai. I didn't want to instantly melt him, so I went ahead and waited to apply Last Gambit, Carnage, Soul Purge, and Berserk until the end. Unfortunately, my weapon didn't awaken here, and I forgot to Fatal Thrust with Raging Strike yet again. Again, never in my stars. Finally, here is an awakened weapon in Yokai Shift against a Kiryoki. Watch the beams. Alrighty, that's it for the video, guys. Thank you for watching.